number 10 spot, we have the Bodmin Jail. The Bodmin Jail is located in Cornwall, England. This jail opened in 1779, and in its most active days, King George III would hold more than 150 criminals in there. Quite the overcrowded prison of the time, although people have long held the belief that King George III was mad, so I suppose this decision could be the result of this. Apparently over 100 years, 55 executions took place in Bodmin. A notable execution was a woman named Selina Wadge, whom many have believed that she still haunts the grounds today. Screaming and banging on the walls has been known to be heard at this prison. Now, this prison was closed and abandoned as a prison in 1926, but eventually it was actually turned into a tourist destination, so you can actually visit this prison. But honestly, at your own risk. You may run into the ghost of Selina, and some say she isn't quite as nice as Casper the Friendly Ghost, if you catch my drift. In our number 9 spot, we have the Atlanta Prison Farm. Located in Atlanta, Georgia, this is a prison that was caught on fire in 2009, and the firefighters did not even try to extinguish the flames. Yeah, it definitely wasn't a treasured landmark, that's for sure. The prison is a little different than the others, as it was surrounded by acres of land, and the prisoners would farm their food. This place was known for being overcrowded and having war criminals and people who were either wrongfully imprisoned or imprisoned for minor crimes. After many moons of being shut down and abandoned, eventually this place became a bit of an urban exploration adventure, as people thought it to be haunted, and even ghost hunters would often visit it. But honestly, just looking at the pictures of it, it's just so worn out and it reeks of low vibes that it looks like it would attract ghosts. You are prohibited from visiting this place, so don't even think about it. I am your YouTube mother. Nah, I'm too young. I am your YouTube older sister, and I encourage you to make good choices and not go, okay? In our number 8 spot, we have the Old Salem Jail. The Old Salem Jail is located, of course, in Salem, Massachusetts. Home of the Hocus Pocus witches, of course. And yes, the town is known for, oh, just a little old thing as, you know, the Salem witch trials. Ever heard of it? Well, if you haven't, Google it. It was quite the historical American event. That town attracts, you know, just the creepiest things. And so it wouldn't be surprising to hear about a jail that was known to be haunted. This jail apparently had stories from it that sounded too gory to be true that people didn't even want to tell them. It closed in 1991, and after being abandoned for a few decades, eventually a hotel brand bought it and turned it into luxury apartment flats. But apparently it doesn't matter how beautiful they make it look, the ghosts from the jail are still around there and people can still hear their cries. One of these days I'm gonna have to visit these prisons in the hopes that I'll be able to hear these supernatural cries. Not that I like people crying, but I want to hear a ghost. You know you want to too. In our number 7 spot, we have the Holmesburg Prison. This prison has to be the worst abandoned prison in the world. I'm serious when I say that the fact that this existed and such inhumane practices were afoot makes me sick to my stomach, to be honest. The prison is located in Pennsylvania, USA, and it was active from 1896 to 1995. The fact that this prison was still open when I was a kid makes me the most uncomfortable. I think our ability to be compassionate has tripled in the last 25 years. Anyways, this is a jail where the prisoners were essentially boiled alive. I'm not joking. The prison was built out of stone and it had large steam radiators, and the wardens would make the temperature go up to 200 degrees, and some of the prisoners would literally die from the heat. To arguably make it worse, the prisoners eventually became testing subjects for biochemical, pharmaceutical, and dermatological weapons. So yeah, it totally makes sense to hear that people believe it to be deeply haunted. I bet. This is one of the darkest prisons by far. In our number 6 spot, we have the Ararat County Jail. In Ararat, Victoria in Australia, there was once a very known jail, the Ararat County Jail, that is now known for its shrieking cries, specifically from an area of the jail called the J Ward. The jail opened in 1861 and was originally intended as a Goldfields prison, but in the 1880s it was turned into a maximum security psychiatric facility for the criminally insane. Not only do people say they still hear the shrieking cries believed to be from the prisoners, but also moans and rapid footsteps are often heard. Apparently when they are heard, it's hard to know that they aren't real, as the footsteps sound so real and human-like. In our number 5 spot, we have the Wyoming Territorial Prison. This prison was built in 1872 and was made to confine the growing number of criminals in the area. But not all went exactly according to plan. People kept escaping. This is wild to me. I didn't realize that any prison had a genuine problem with this. I thought when people escaped it was like a one-off thing. Anyways, yep, people would escape, and they had a bit of an overcrowding issue as well. A famous name from the prison though is a man named Julius Greenwald, who was sentenced for taking the life of his wife. He apparently had a quote-unquote expert hand when it came to rolling cigars, and boy would he smoke a lot of them. Apparently Julius's cigar scent can still be smelt at the prison in the place where he died in 1901. Passing away in 1901 from heart failure, Julius's ghost still lingers about in the place he died. It is said that you can also smell the cigar scent in the corridors leading to where he died. Interesting. Well, smoke and cigar/cigarette scents do tend to linger, so it makes sense. In our number 4 spot, we have the Carabanchel Prison. The Carabanchel Prison, located in Madrid, Spain, was originally constructed by political prisoners after the Spanish Civil War between 1940 to 1944. It was known as one of the biggest prisons in Europe until it was closed down in 1998. The prisoners were made to do slave labor when it was active, and after it was closed, it became known as an abandoned haunted building. In 2008, the Spanish government decided that it needed to be destroyed because no one should go onto the grounds. Probs because it was that haunted, but most likely because it was just a sad part of their history that they want to forget. Apparently a hospital and apartments are now in the area, and it hasn't been confirmed if people ever feel any paranormal activity, but we're gonna say probably. In our number 3 spot, we have the William Porter Reformatory. The William Porter Reformatory is located in Tokaji, South Africa. This is a bit of a disturbing prison because it was not exactly for adults. Most of the prisoners were actually quite young, which honestly makes me ill to think about. They were kept in isolation cells, and for what purpose? Oh, just a racially driven one. To further the separation between the black and white working class community, and to teach the prisoners to not interact and to socially know their place. Thankfully, this horrific place was closed down in 1910, but of course the energy and sadness must still surround the building. Seeing the pictures of this place honestly breaks my heart and makes me the most sad. In our number 2 spot, we have the Old Charleston Jail. The Old Charleston Jail is a jail that was built in 1802 in South Carolina, USA. This is an abandoned place that you may actually want to visit if you're someone who's very into supernatural phenomena, as this is a place that is known for its ghostly encounters. Ooh, yeah, I want to go. This jail was actually home to a very notable prisoner, Lavinia Fisher. Lavinia and her husband, John Fisher, were owners of a Charleston inn called the 6 Mile Wayfarer House, and they were sent to prison as apparently they were luring businessmen into their inn and then killing them and stealing their belongings. They say that her ghost is haunting this jail, and reports of many supernatural noises, smells, and sightings have occurred there. So maybe you don't want to visit this place. Something about this woman's story makes me think she's the type of ghost to want to possess you. But I have a very active imagination, so who knows. If I ever visit, I'ma go straight to a priest and get an exorcism afterwards. That's what I would do. And finally, in our number 1 spot, we have the Moundsville, West Virginia Penitentiary. Yes, of course, I have to have this one on the list. This place is one of the most known prisons of all time. The West Virginia Penitentiary is located, of course, in the state of Virginia, USA, and it is most known for its brutal punishments. It was active from 1876 to 1995, and during that time the prisoners experienced beatings so bad that some passed away from them. They also experienced electrocution, and yes, they also practiced hanging the prisoners for a very long time as well. The prison was also known for having many escapees and causing riots. The violence and the inhumane practices were inevitably what led to it being shut down. Many people believe the prison to be extremely haunted, so it is not advised to go and visit if you are fearful of seeing a ghost.
And we're starting off this list with the Pottawatomie County Jail located in Council Bluffs, Iowa. It was built in 1885 and is known as the squirrel cage, or at least it used to be, due to its unique design. Instead of traditional cells, the jail featured a rotating circular cage. The design was kind of revolutionary for the time. It was intended to increase security and allow for better surveillance of the inmates, but was ultimately discontinued due to its impracticalities. Some prisoners were also severely harmed in the rotating contraption. So basically there was these cylindrical cages that prisoners' cells were located in. They each had one opening, and the jailer turned this crank and the cell would rotate to either face the opening or the enclosed part of the cage. It was pretty dangerous, and a lot of prisoners lost limbs. So yeah, not a place you would have wanted to end up in. Despite being decommissioned in 1969, many people believe that this county jail is haunted. The former jail was also featured in Ghost Adventures, so if you want to learn more about it, you can check that episode out. At number 9, we have the Orleans Parish Prison. Orleans Parish Prison, located in New Orleans, Louisiana, is regarded as one of the worst prisons in the United States and was one of the most heavily impacted facilities during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The prison has a violent reputation and has been scrutinized for being understaffed, filthy. Probably the most infamous incident at the prison, though, took place during Hurricane Katrina. Roughly 650 prisoners were left behind in the prison after the hurricane hit, and the conditions inside quickly deteriorated. Of course, as the floodwaters rose and power was lost, many inmates were left without food, water, basic necessities, and some were forced to drink from toilets in order to survive. It's believed that over 500 prisoners lost their lives. The State Correctional Institution, also known as Western Penitentiary in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This former prison has been left abandoned since 2017 and is known for a particularly dark incident that took place in 1987. A fire broke out in one of the prison's cell blocks, causing significant damage and endangering the lives of inmates and staff. That's what fire does. It's dangerous. It was later revealed, though, that the fire had been deliberately started by a group of guards in response to a protest by inmates. The incident happened when a group of inmates began protesting poor conditions and mistreatment at the facility, including overcrowding and limited access to basic necessities. In response, a group of guards reportedly entered the cell block and set fire to a pile of garbage, causing the blaze to quickly spread throughout the area. Inmates were left trapped in their cells, and smoke and flames engulfed the block. Many suffered smoke inhalation and other injuries as a result. Nevada State Prison. This former prison started operation in 1862 and has been left abandoned since 2012. Located in Carson City, Nevada State Prison was known for its harsh conditions, numerous executions, and some of its infamous inmates. Prison's long history has this association with death and despair, and it's led a lot of people to believe it could be haunted. Numerous reports of paranormal activity have been documented by visitors and employees of the prison. Strange sounds, eerie voices, and unexplained footsteps have all been discussed, particularly in the cell blocks, the execution chamber. Visitors have also reported feeling a sense of unease or, being watched by mysterious eyes. And some have even claimed to have seen apparitions of former inmates or guards. One of the most famous ghosts believed to haunt the prison is that of a former inmate who was executed by hanging in the 19th century. Many visitors have also reported seeing his ghost in the execution chamber or hearing his disembodied voice. Other reported hauntings include a guard who was murdered by inmates in the 1950s. The prison's eerie reputation has drawn attention from a lot of ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts like Jack Baggins himself and his Ghost Adventures crew. Next up, we have the Old Essex County Jail. The Old Essex County Jail, located in Newark, New Jersey, was known for its harsh conditions and, again, brutal treatment of inmates. Today, many people believe that the jail is haunted by the spirits of those who died within the walls due to the extreme conditions and inhumane treatment of the former inmates. One of the main reasons why the Old Essex County Jail is considered haunted is the high number of deaths that occurred. The jail's overcrowded conditions, poor sanitation, and lack of medical care led to numerous outbreaks of disease, which claimed the lives of many inmates. Additionally, the jail was the site of several violent incidents. Trauma and, pain that happened within these walls, some say kind of left an imprint on the jail, leading to the supposed paranormal activity. And another factor that contributes to the possible haunting is the evidence of ghostly activity. If you want to call it evidence, it's people saying they've seen or heard things. Visitors and staff have reported hearing strange noises, whispers, all your classics. Some have even seen full-bodied apparitions, including the ghost of a former inmate who is said to have hung himself within his cell. Others have experienced sudden drops in temperature or seen unexplained orbs of light. I always find orbs kind of boring, but I don't know, that's just me. I want to see like a ghost, The point is, this site is now abandoned and technically prohibited, so enter at your own risk. The Missouri State Penitentiary. This former prison located in Jefferson City, Missouri, that was operational for 168 years. Prison was notorious for overcrowding, inhumane conditions, and it had a very violent history, with numerous riots and incidents of inmate abuse reported throughout its existence. Today, many people believe that the Missouri State Penitentiary is haunted, with paranormal activity reported by visitors and staff. One of the most reported ghostly sightings is that of a shadowy figure who is said to haunt the gas chamber where he was executed. Other reported sightings include the ghosts of course, former inmates and guards. As I said before, the prison has a long and violent history, with countless inmates suffering and dying over its 168 years of operation. The prison was also the site of, again, numerous executions, with over 40 prisoners being put to death in the gas chamber alone. Next up is a pretty big one. It's Fremantle Prison. Fremantle Prison is a former maximum security prison located in Fremantle, Western Australia. A lot of supposedly haunted prisons in Australia, oddly enough. Like there's a ton. The prison was operational from 1855 to 1991 and housed some of the country's most notorious criminals. The prison is now a popular tourist attraction, but back when it was operational, probably not a place you'd want to go. And even still, many people believe that the Fremantle prison is haunted, with numerous reports of ghostly sightings and unexplained phenomena. One of the most commonly reported ghostly sightings is that of a former inmate who was executed at the prison in 1844. Visitors have reported seeing his ghostly figure walking the prison's corridors in the middle of the night. Other reported paranormal activity includes the sound of footsteps, slamming doors, and unexplained noises coming from empty cells. Visitors have also reported feeling a sense, again, of unease or being touched by unseen hands while in certain areas of the prison. Next up, we have another Australian prison, the Old Melbourne Gaol. This former prison located in Melbourne, Australia, was operational from 1845 until 1924. The prison is famous for its grim history, with over 130 prisoners executed on the gallows during its operation. And today, the prison is open to the public as a museum, with guided tours offering visitors a glimpse into the lives of the prisoners who were incarcerated. But when it was operational as a prison, again, you would have been warned never to go near it. It housed some of Australia's most notorious criminals and was known for its inhumane conditions. Big surprise, surprise. Prisoners' cells were tiny and overcrowded, with up to 4 inmates crammed into a single cell. The prisoners were forced to sleep on hard wooden planks without any bedding. Sanitation was almost non-existent too, with only a few communal toilets available for hundreds of prisoners. The cells were rarely cleaned, and inmates were often left to live in filth, which resulted in the spread of disease and infection. And in terms of punishment, you had solitary confinement, flogging, or even hanging for the most serious of crimes. The gallows at the prison saw the execution of over 130 prisoners, making it one of the most notorious places of execution in Australian history, which is also why it's said to be one of the most haunted prisoners in Australia. The Atlanta Prison Farm is a former correctional facility located in Atlanta, Georgia. It's known for its tough conditions and forced labor practices. Today, the prison is abandoned and many people believe it to be haunted. One of the most commonly reported paranormal occurrences at the Atlanta Prison Farm is the apparition of a former prisoner who was killed during a failed escape attempt. Visitors are reported seeing the ghostly figure of a man running through the prison's corridors before disappearing into the thin air. Some visitors to the prison have reported feeling a sense of unease or being touched again by people that aren't really there. There have also been reports of mysterious, orbs of light. I'm not too enthused about that, but people are really obsessed with orbs. There's orb enthusiasts out there. Figures are also seen appearing in photographs taken inside the prison. Despite the supposed paranormal activity at the prison, the Atlanta Prison Farm remains a popular destination for ghost hunters and urban explorers looking to experience the, haunted history firsthand. I'd actually like to go. I'd check it. I've never been to an abandoned, supposedly haunted place before, but, no one wants to go. Anyone want to go with me? Let me know in the comments. Probably won't happen, but, Garcia Moreno Prison, located in Quito, Ecuador, was once home to some of the most notorious criminals in the country's history. It was also violent and overcrowded, not a place I would have ever wanted to visit. Today, Garcia Moreno is well known for its haunted reputation. Many visitors and locals believe that the abandoned prison is haunted by the spirits of former inmates who suffered and died there. Some of the most commonly reported paranormal activity includes strange, weird noises, voices that are disembodied, and, just this eerie feeling of being watched. Visitors have also reported seeing ghostly figures and shadows moving throughout the prison, and the harsh living conditions, frequent outbreaks of violence, and numerous deaths that occurred within the prison are believed to have left a lingering presence of unrest and suffering. And it's interesting with this one too, because apparently it's abandoned, but a lot of the stuff the prisoners left behind are still there. It almost looks like people just suddenly disappeared. Despite being closed for several years, Garcia Moreno Prison continues to draw visitors who are interested in its macabre history and the chance to experience paranormal.
In our number 10 spot, we of course have Alcatraz. Alcatraz is one of the world's most known prisons. It's a prison located off the coast of San Francisco, and when it was active, it was a federal prison. It became known as one of the hardest prisons in the United States, where only the worst prisoners were kept. Apparently, it was known for its poor living conditions, along with starvation and horrible, torturous punishments. There were many killings, suicides, and so much violence that it's not a surprise that people believe it to be haunted. Specifically in a section of the prison called D Block, where a prisoner was complaining of an evil spirit in his cell, and the guards found him dead in the next morning. There are many ghost stories, even one where people have claimed to have seen Al Capone in the shower, hopefully naked. Not because I'm a creep, but because the thought of a naked ghost in the shower is just funny to me. In our number 9 spot, we have the Kingston Penitentiary. In Kingston, Ontario, Canada, there is a former maximum security prison called the Kingston Penitentiary. I actually visited this prison when I was a kid, and I remember being terrified. It was so spooky from the outside. Anyway, Kingston Pen has a ton of stories told by people that have formerly worked there and people that have visited the prison. Stories such as feeling cold in strange places to experiencing gut feelings to leave where you are right now. There's stories and sightings of a ghost of an old staff member by the name of William Wentworth, who goes up and down the halls and locks the cell doors. He was killed by what is assumed to be a prisoner. However, his killer was never actually caught. He'll probably haunt the place until his killer is caught, because that's some major unfinished business. In our number 8 spot, we have the Maxwell Street Police Station. Known for being one of the most violent and brutal police stations, it is located in a neighborhood called Bloody Maxwell in Chicago. So if that doesn't say it all, then I don't know what to tell you. The city apparently was flooded with mobsters, and the police station was filled with corruption. The dungeon in the basement is where the paranormal rumors come from. It was known as a place for torture, and most criminals would never leave the station after going in there. People have reported the rattling of handcuffs on cell bars, as well as screams from past prisoners. It closed in 1997, and fun fact, the cast of Chicago PD get to hang out with the ghosts all the time as it is filmed there. In our number 7 spot, we have the Mansfield, Ohio Reformatory. The Mansfield, Ohio Reformatory was built between 1886 to 1910 and closed in 1990. So many of these prisons closed in 1990, there must have been a huge shift in the prison world in terms of how the prisoners were treated and whatnot at that time. Anyways, this prison is famous for being the inspiration behind the movie Shawshank Redemption, one of my mom's personal favorites, along with Schindler's List. She likes to cry. It is known for being haunted, and so I had to put it on this list. Witnesses have reported paranormal activity in the basement where the solitary confinement cells were. People have reported seeing ghosts, hearing screams and moans from the former prisoners, as well as the haunting of one of the warden's wives who was apparently fatally injured at the prison. In our number 6 spot, we have the Tower of London. Apparently, it is known to be one of the most haunted places in London. It was meant to be a safe place for the royal family at first, then became a dark, horrifying place for prisoners. There are apparently thousands of ghost sightings here, and among them is Thomas A. Becket, who is believed to have caused problems with some of the construction with the tower. But apparently Queen Anne Boleyn is one of the most spotted ghosts. Many have reported seeing a headless body walking through the tower corridors, which would make sense as the tower is close to the site where she was executed. This is wild. I really want to go there now. I want to see a headless ghost. It would be better if it was nearly headless, like, you know, Harry Potter's nearly headless Nick, but whatever, this will do. In our number 5 spot, we have Old Richmond Jail. Located in Tasmania, Australia, this isn't the most widely known jail, but it is definitely one of the scariest, it seems. This place was built around 1825, and it has a whipping yard, a cookhouse, solitary confinement cells, and basically anything you can imagine a scary prison would have. It has many ghost sightings and is believed to be heavily haunted. From sightings of a lady in a pink dress, to ghost young ones, to feeling cold shivers and hearing strange noises, there have been too many encounters to count. Best to stay away from touring this prison unless you love ghosts, then never mind. Proceed. In our number 4 spot, we have the Eastern State Penitentiary. This is a prison that operated as a sort of solitary confinement. It opened in 1829 and was active until 1971. It was meant to psychologically harm the prisoners, with the noise being kept to a bare minimum. Many who misbehaved were tortured in various ways, including what was called the mad chair, where inmates were strapped to a chair so tightly that their circulation was cut off. So yeah, it's understandable that it is props haunted. Many have reported hearing crying, screaming, whispers, and even footsteps around the prison. People have also reported seeing dark shadows, and even Al Capone once complained that he was haunted by a ghost named James Clark, who was a victim of the St. Valentine's Massacre. In our number 3 spot, we have the Old Geelong Jail. It could be pronounced Geelong. I don't know. I tried looking it up. I think it's Geelong, we're going with it. Another Australian prison that is said to be pretty fierce. It was built between 1849 to 1864 and was open until 1991. In addition to being a jail, this place was also used by the Australian Army as a post-World War II detention center. It was also an industrial school for girls. So yeah, there is a mixed bag of ghosts at this place. Over 500 plus deaths occurred in this place. People have claimed that particular areas of the jail are haunted by a demon, as well as apparently an old guard haunts this place. In fact, there are reports of sightings in shock blocks, the walkways, the morgue, and even the kitchen, and it seems that perhaps it's more than one demon that haunts this place. Strange smells and violent attacks have been reported along with screams. Well, thank the Lord this place has closed up shop. I wouldn't wish a ghost haunting on even my worst enemy. In our number 2 spot, we have the San Lucas Prison. This is a prison that is located on the San Lucas Island, which is a Costa Rican island. Many prisoners who were sent there saw the death penalty. The prison is notoriously known for its extremely poor living conditions and torture methods. Apparently, about 60 men would be crammed into a cell at a time. There were cells underground used for solitary confinement, and get this, they were typically flooded with water and sewage. Just disgusting. Yeah, if I was a prisoner that was put in a room with sewage, you best believe I'm coming back to haunt every one of those horrible people that worked there that clearly should have been prisoners themselves. Did I mention the artwork on the walls that was made from human blood? Yeah, forgot that one. It's known to be haunted by a priest and a nurse that worked there, as well as obviously the former inmates. People continue to hear screaming, begging, and crying men till this day. In our number 1 spot, we have the West Virginia State Penitentiary. The prison is so haunted that they even offer ghost tours at this point. Well, might as well capitalize on it. I would. Apparently, they also offer escape room type events, and that sounds horrible to me. First off, it's a real prison, and second, this is a prison that is known for its ghosts. What fun! Let's pretend to be prisoners and escape a real cell and hang out with the ghosts for an hour. Nah thanks, honey. Anyways, this prison is known for having the worst of the worst criminals and many executions. So many of the prisoners were killed by other prisoners, and what is suspected as by some of the guards as well. It is known as one of the most haunted prisons in the United States. Most of the ghost sightings comes from the North Hall, where the most dangerous criminals were kept, where people have reported shadows and footsteps. Apparently also the Hole and the Sugar Shack underground have many reports of people feeling panic when down there and a paranoid feeling of being watched. I hope that's not where the escape rooms are.
We're starting off this list with the Shepton Mallet Prison. So we're going to be talking a lot about brutal prisons that you would have been warned not to visit before they were finally shut down. So I figured I'd start things off with a prison that is no longer operational, but you may still not want to visit for another reason. Ghosts. Located in Somerset, England, Shepton Mallet is known as one of the most haunted prisons in the world and has a long storied history. It had completed construction in 1910 and was fully operational until 1990 and had changed hands several times over the course of its operation. It was a military prison in both British and American hands during World War II and then went back to British hands after that. The walls of this historic building are said to house the tortured spirits that were once inmates of the prison, where countless hangings took place. There are ghost tours now. If you want to go at your own risk. Next on the list, we have the West Virginia Penitentiary, also known as the Moundsville Penitentiary. This was a maximum security prison located in Moundsville, West Virginia. The prison operated from 1876 to 1995, notorious for its brutal living conditions. Something that will be a running theme on the list was the prison's issues with overcrowding. For a prison that was supposed to only hold 480 inmates, 2,000 prisoners at times, probably a little much. Obviously, the cells were cramped. There was also no air conditioning or heating, but honestly, with the amount of inmates packed into the place, heating may have been the last thing anyone would have wanted. It was one of the most violent and dangerous prisons in the United States. It was plagued by riots and murders. In 1986, a major riot broke out, which brought national attention to the deplorable conditions of the prison. So, as a result of the riots and ongoing safety concerns, the West Virginia Penitentiary was finally shut down in 1995. But definitely not a place you would have been advised to go to before that. The Ohio State Reformatory, also known as the Mansfield Reformatory, was a correctional facility located in Mansfield, Ohio. The facility was operational from 1896 to 1990, and over the course of its operation, the conditions became notoriously poor and inhumane, which eventually led to its closure. The facility was overcrowded, which led to unsanitary living conditions. Multiple inmates were crammed into cells that were only meant for 2 people. The lack of space also meant that some prisoners had to sleep on the floor. And I don't know about you, I've never seen a prison with a comfy carpeted floor. These conditions were made even worse by the inhumane treatment of the inmates. Physical abuse was common among guards. Inmates were also subject to psychological abuse, including prolonged isolation and sensory deprivation. In the 1970s, a federal court declared that the conditions of the reformatory were just inhumane and ordered, changes to be implemented. But these changes were just too slow to come, and it was just a little too late. It was finally shut down in 1990. Eastern State Penitentiary, located in Philadelphia, was designed to be this new and revolutionary model for a prison when it first opened in 1829. Each inmate would be isolated in their own cell, unable to communicate with other inmates. They had a small exercise yard attached to their cell, and they also had a skylight. Inmates spent 23 hours a day in their cells, with only 1 hour for exercise in the yard, which was also enclosed so that inmates couldn't see or communicate with each other. The cells were deliberately designed to be uncomfortable. They had a single hard bench and a toilet that was visible to guards at all times. Conditions pretty harsh. Over time, the prison also became overcrowded, with more and more inmates becoming crammed into the small cells. This led to a decline in the quality of life for the prisoners, which was already pretty not great, and the conditions became increasingly unsanitary and unsafe. Riots and violence were common, and the guards struggled to just maintain control over all the inmates. After 142 years of operation, the prison finally closed in 1971. Alright, so this is a German word. In German, I don't speak it, so this might come out a little janky. Hohenschönhausen Prison is a former Stasi prison located in Berlin, Germany. It was originally built in 1945, but in 1951, the Soviet secret police transferred control of the facility to the Eastern German Ministry of State Security, commonly known as the Stasi. Used it as a prison for opponents of the regime. The prison just had terrible living conditions, and the inmates were treated, of course, horribly, as you could probably imagine. They were subjected to physical violence, forced labor, but psychological torture was the main method used here. They would threaten to harm inmates' families. Sleep deprivation was also big. They were held in cramped cells without windows and were often denied food and medical treatment. Many inmates were interrogated for weeks or months on end, often resulting in false confessions. Despite the human rights abuses in the prison, the facility remained hidden from the public for many years. It was located in a restricted area, so this is one you definitely wouldn't be visiting because there's a good chance you wouldn't have even known it existed. Inmates were not allowed to communicate with the outside world and were often held in solitary confinement to prevent them from sharing information about their treatment. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, next on the list. Alcatraz, aka The Rock, was known for its harsh conditions, and the prison became infamous for the brutal treatment of its inmates. Inmates were often crammed, again, into tiny windowless cells with no ventilation. The medical care was also minimal, and the food was as notoriously bad as the notorious prisoners housed within the facility. I imagine that's most prisons, though. I've been alive for a good amount of time now, and when it comes to prison food, never heard good things. It's like meals you get on airplanes or hospitals. Every hack comedian across the globe just has a field day with how bad they are. It's just kind of an accepted known thing. The prison was also plagued by violence and, of course, overcrowding. Inmates were frequently attacked and abused by other prisoners, and there were several incidents of riots and escape attempts. The most famous of these was the Battle of Alcatraz in 1946. 6 inmates attempted to escape and were taken out in a violent standoff with the guards. Finally, in 1963, the prison was closed due to its high operating costs and the deteriorating condition of the buildings. At number 4, we have the Bangkwang Central Prison. This one is actually still operational, although there are some particularly harsh practices that have been banned. It's still advised to veer as clear from this place as possible, though it's pretty horrific. Located in the outskirts of Bangkok, Thailand, this prison was built to house exceptionally dangerous offenders, a good number of which are on death row. For the first 3 months of an inmate's sentence, they were chained to leg irons, and those awaiting death row were welded into them permanently until they were finally executed. But that practice has since been banned. It's one of the most infamous prisons in Asia. It was given the nickname Big Tiger, which perfectly describes how the prison seems to consume the inmates, almost like a death factory. Next up, we have Carandiru Penitentiary. Carandiru Penitentiary was one of the largest and most infamous prisons in Brazil until it was demolished in 2002. Prison was designed to house 4,000 inmates, but often had more than double that number. So obviously you had severe overcrowding, and I can only imagine how unsanitary the conditions must have been, but I don't really want to. The prison lacked basic necessities like, adequate food, clean water, proper medical care. So not only were inmates in these crowded living conditions, but there was disease and malnutrition to deal with. So anyone in their right mind would have clearly warned you never to go near this place. In 1992, there was a massive riot at the prison. 111 inmates died, and it all apparently started over a game of football. In addition to the lack of basic necessities, the prison was also known to have pretty brutal guards. Inmates were subjected to physical and psychological torture. The use of solitary confinement was also rampant, and prisoners could be locked in cramped dark cells for weeks or even months at a time. Despite repeated calls for, changes, little was done to improve conditions at the prison. It was finally closed in 2002. La Sabaneta prison, located in Zulia, Venezuela, was pretty notorious for being about as corrupt and deplorable as a prison can possibly be. Reports of torture, extortion, and violence were common in this prison, with gangs and criminal groups controlling most of the prison's activities. In fact, they basically ran the whole prison. It was a prison run by prisoners, like one step away from escape from New York. Inmates were often forced to pay protection fees to these groups in order to receive basic necessities like food and water, and it was just, again, plagued by corruption, guards and officials often taking bribes to turn a blind eye to the kind of illegal activities of the inmates. Due to the horrific conditions at La Sabaneta prison, human rights groups and the United Nations started calling for its closure, so no doubt members of the CIA would have urged you not to visit this place. In 2013, the Venezuelan government finally announced plans to shut down the prison and transfer the inmates to other facilities. The decision had come after this massive riot happened where over 50 people lost their lives. Holmesburg Prison. This one has quite the nickname, the Terror Dome. That is so dystopian sounding, it's not even funny. It sounds like something right out of Mad Max or something. And turns out, kinda was. This place didn't just get the intimidating nickname for nothing. The Terror Dome was home to countless dangerous scientific experiments conducted on the inmates. It's hard to believe some of this stuff actually happened. It's completely inhumane. The experiments were run by a dermatologist named Dr. Albert Kligman, who is this living embodiment of a mad scientist. The inmates did volunteer to be experimented on, but that's because there were small sums of money involved. A lot of them were desperate and they didn't really know the full extent or ramifications of these experiments. He tested all kinds of things on inmates. He exposed them to microwave radiation, he infected them with various skin diseases. He performed several biochemical experiments like exposure to dioxin, for example. This is a substance used in Agent Orange, so not good. Kligman described how he felt when he first entered the prison and is quoted saying, "All I saw before me were acres of skin. It was like a farmer seeing a fertile field for the first time. Very, very sickening stuff.
Number 10. Moundsville Penitentiary, West Virginia. Oh, take me home, country roads to the place I belong, West Virginia. Okay, that's enough of that. I think me singing will haunt your dreams more than any of the places on this list. Well, first we have the Moundsville Penitentiary. This place opened in 1879 and quickly became one of the most violent prisons in America. That's basically being the heavyweight champion of violent prisons. In the time that this prison was open, there was 36 and a bunch of so you better believe that this place is packed full of ghosts that walk the halls. One of the most famous ghosts wasn't even an inmate. People say they've seen the ghost of a maintenance man who used to work there. He was brutally by the inmates because he would inform the guards when the inmates were misbehaving. Snitches, get stitches, baby. The game is the game. The Moundsville Penitentiary is known as the most haunted place on earth. So the moral of the story goes, don't snitch or you're gonna end up a ghost around a bunch of the people that you snitched on. Number 9. Bodmin Jail. Now we're gonna shoot over to Cornwall, England and check out the Bodmin Jail. I would have hated to go to jail back in the day. I'm sure it would have been easier to break out, but the conditions would have been horrible. At least they have Purell now. The Bodmin Jail is one of those old school hellholes. It was built back in 1779 and managed to stay open for 100 years. Now it stands as a major hotspot for paranormal activity. They got it all at the Bodmin Jail. Weird voices, footsteps, loud bangs, soft touches on your bum before a wet kiss. You know, all the stuff that ghosts do all the time. The most famous ghost that hangs within the walls is the spirit of Selena Wade. She got locked up for her kids, so it's safe to say she's terrifying. It said that whenever mothers come to visit the jail, it said that she'll harass them, trying to get the visiting mothers to forgive her for the crimes that she committed. So don't your kids. Number 8. Cripple Creek Jail. When the population of a town starts to skyrocket, a few things will always happen. Rent goes up, and then you have to move into a place with 67 roommates. Jobs disappear, so you better behave yourself at work unless you want to start selling off your respect for money. And of course, local anemones are usually not equipped to deal with anything. That's what happened in Cripple Creek in the late 1800s when the gold rush hit. People's lust for striking rich overnight shot this town up from 1,500 to 50,000 people in a very short period of time. This of course made the crime shoot through the roof and then forced a small town to try and find ways to manage all the prisoners. This led to many deaths at the Cripple Creek Jail, both on the sides of inmates and guards. It's actually said that one of the most famous ghosts hanging around the jail today is that of a female guard. People say she stayed behind to keep the other ghosts in prison. Give this girl a raise. She has allegiance even in death, baby. Number 7. Eastern State Penitentiary. This penitentiary in Philadelphia was open for 42 years and had the reputation for being one of the most brutal prisons of all time. Inmates were treated worse than cattle. They would be kept in near total isolation for 23 hours a day. The rooms that they were kept in had 0 windows. That means no sunlight is getting through. You gotta get that vitamin D. Staying away from the sun for a long time is really bad for your health. Well, I mean, so is going to jail, but whatever. Guards would also torture inmates in brutal ways. One thing they would do is take inmates who had misbehaved and put them in a place called the Hole. This was a dark pit in the ground with 0 light and hardly any room to move. While in the hole, they would be given just enough food and water to survive, and after their time was up, the guards would pull out their nearly lifeless bodies and throw them back into a secluded cell. Many inmates went mad or died from the isolation, and ghosts have been spotted all over the prison, especially in the rooms where these tortures would take place. Number 6. Ararat County Jail. Now we're going down under to Australia. A country built by criminals must have had some of the worst prisons of all time. Imagine being such a monster that you get locked up when you're living around criminals. You would have to be a baby eater dog kicker or something terrible like that. Well, the Ararat County Jail was a place where you would send these kinds of people. What made this place especially terrible is that it was a prison for the criminally insane. So there were all sorts of treatments performed on patients. And by treatments, I mean lobotomies dummies without anesthesia, along with shock treatment and an array of other horrible things that no human should have to endure. It's said that you can hear the screams of people who were tortured there to this day. One of the most famous ghosts that lurk the halls is that of Nurse Carrie, a nurse who defends her ward and tries to stop people from coming in. She still doesn't want the public to know about the terrible things they would do to patients. Well, the word's out, Carrie. Everyone knows you're a turd. Number 5. The London Tower. This is probably the most famous one on the list. The London Tower is over 900 years old and is a major hotspot for tourists. If you're a ghost, this is the place to haunt. You get to scare thousands of people every year and probably photobomb everybody. Imagine being the ghost that everyone talks about at the London Tower. How glamorous. It was originally made as a safe haven for the royal family, but got converted into a prison not long after that. Everything went down from there. Prisoners would be tortured, tried, and executed all in the big brick building. So you can imagine there's some major bad mojo floating around. The tower is constantly guarded by the royal guard, and when new guards are stationed there, many of them have reported a crushing sensation in their chest. I'm guessing the ghosts want to see if you're a punk weenie before they let you work there. The most famous ghost is probably that of Queen Anne Boleyn, one of the wives of Henry VIII. She was beheaded in the London Tower. Very fancy. Number 4. Ohio State Reformatory. For those of you who are movie buffs, you are really going to like this one because this is where they filmed Shawshank Redemption. Yeah, one of the greatest movies of all time. And if you like hostile encounters with ghosts, like being shoved or yelled at, then this is the place for you. You have no excuse not to check it out. The place was built in Mansfield, Ohio between the years of 1886 and 1910. This place was a hoot and a holler when it went up and quickly got the reputation for having some of the worst conditions of any prison. Jolly gee, sign me up, mister. In fact, in 1910 the prison was shut down because the conditions were inhumane. My god, it sounds like a great vacation spot. Now they just keep it open for ghost tours. If you decide to go there, you should prepare yourself for everything from phones malfunctioning to cold spots to straight up being pushed. You know what they say about these Ohio State ghosts? They are great hosts. Number 3. Alcatraz. If you live in North America, then this is probably the most famous prison to you. I mean, it's one of the most legendary places in the world. Some of the worst criminals ever spent time in there. By spent time in there, you know I mean forced to stay there because of their horrible crimes. Al Capone being one of the most famous criminals who was caged at the Rock. This place was so rough that were commonplace. A murder going down to Alcatraz was like someone who leaves negative YouTube comments having a girlfriend pillow. It's extremely common. Even before the prison was built, the Native Americans would use the island as a place to exile people, and they believed dark spirits lived on the island. There was even a case of an inmate saying he could see glowing red eyes in his cell and started screaming. In the morning, he was found dead with strangle marks on his neck. Number 2. Kurowska Naval Port Prison. Let's run over to the Soviet prison that was opened in the year 1900. I wouldn't want to get thrown in a Russian prison now, man. Imagine back then. They probably didn't even have blankets. You probably kept yourself warm through mental toughness. This place was built in Latvia and used as a detention center for the Russian military who broke some war laws. I don't know what war laws are, but you can leave them in the comments. It's stated on the record that no one ever escaped this jail, but it was built in the middle of nowhere. So if you ever did escape this jail, you would probably just freeze to death or be eaten by a bear. Now you can go there to do something they call Extreme Night, where they let you spend the night in the jail. A place that is haunted by dead war criminals? That's a hard pass for me. And number 1 on the list, the Shepton Mallet Prison. We're gonna top off this list with the Shepton Mallet Prison in Somerset, England. Until the year 2013, this prison was the oldest operating prison in the world. It was built in the year 1625. I didn't even know that was legal. If I was there, I would keep asking the question, is this up to code? Even though I knew the answer was no, that would be like my little dad joke. I would tell everyone until someone shut me up by stabbing me in the liver. This place is so old that there are even unmarked graves around the prison from prisoners who died from smallpox. Goddamn, smallpox got you while you were in prison? That's a huge bummer. The prison is famous for housing some of the most dangerous prisoners in all of England and is also super haunted. There was even an attack where a guard was assaulted by an invisible assailant and got burned.
Starting off this brutal list, and at number 10 we have Kabowwow Jail. This is a prison that has a very dark history. It was revealed by WikiLeaks that some of the prison guards use humiliation on some of the inmates who were jailed here in 2005. And back in October 1993, police opened fire on the inmates, killing 5 prisoners and injuring 28 of them. And this is after they objected to be searched. Another incident took place in 2004 when the police used tear gas shelling and aerial firing on the prisoners for no particular reason. So yeah, I would say this is one of the most dangerous prisons in India. If I ever commit a crime, please don't send me there. Up next, number 9, we are taking a look at the Arthur Road Jail located in Mumbai. This notorious jail houses some of India's most wanted criminals and oh yeah, did I also mention that it is severely overcrowded? The toilets are not cleaned for days. People are living so close to unhygienic inmates, which lead to many prisoners to get skin diseases. Because of the extremely low living conditions and living quarters, so many of these inmates have become violent and uncontrollable. There are so many prison gangs that have other prisoners and have caused countless riots. There was an incident where 4 inmates were severely injured after they were involved in a huge fight where the 2 groups used sharpened pieces of metallic sheets and edges of their plates as weapons to attack each other. In the prison, no one is safe. Bird Jail takes us to number 8. In the ancient city of Patna, almost every major crime is linked to the gang lords who are kept behind bars at the Bird Jail. So not only are the criminals dangerous within the prison cell walls, but they're also heavily involved with a lot of criminal activity that is happening outside of the prison. In March 2010, a person was brutally by this gang when he refused to pay the extortion demands of these jailed criminals. So needless to say, prisons can't even keep these criminals in order. Moving on to some more dangerous prisons, we have the Dasna jail in at number 7. People who lived in this area of this prison are scared of the criminals who live behind these walls. And that's because 13 men with terrible records of violence and abuse have come together at this prison to form the Gorkhan gang. It is also a disgusting prison that has very low hygiene standards, which makes the prisoners living here to be angry and highly violent. During a routine checkup, it was found that at least 27 prisoners, they were diagnosed with HIV, which is one of the most serious and deadly diseases in human history. Begusari jail comes onto this dangerous list at number 6. An 18-year-old inmate described his time here as the most terrifying experiences that he has ever had to face. Even after he was released, he said that he wakes up screaming from nightmares of police boots crashing into his chest and from all of the scary criminals staring at him. He was released after spending 72 days in this awful prison because someone else had confessed to the crime. But when he was initially interrogated by the police at the prison, he was tortured into confessing to a crime that he didn't even commit. He just wanted it to stop. So this poor kid spent over 2 months in this dangerous prison as an innocent person. Moradabad Central Jail brings us to number 5. This prison is grossly overpopulated. It is said that the 2,200 inmates are so crammed that they're actually forced to sleep in shifts. I mean, is this real life right now? This jail is also known to be the worst jail for women inmates in India because they are and physically assaulted on a daily basis. This prison was built to hold 650 inmates, but due to a severe overcrowding, they stuffed 2,200 inmates behind these cell doors, and the only time that these convicts can get some sort of break is when half of them go to their trials during the day. Puzhal Central Prison breaks onto this list at number 4. The prison houses some of the most notorious and dangerous inmates in India, and because of this, there have been many cases of extreme violence and murders that have occurred within these walls. One inmate told a news channel that he had been imprisoned here for 5 years while he was awaiting trial. And according to him, they were forced to clean their toilets with mud and there was no running water. There was another incident where 5 inmates ganged up on another prisoner, dragged them to an empty room where they brutally attacked him in the throat and private parts. And they did it with a homemade knife. There are so many other incidents that involved gang violence at this prison, it's almost too many to count, so let's move on.
Number 3 takes us over to Yerwada Jail, which is located in Pune, India. This is a highly security jail that is currently housing 5,000 prisoners. Many famous freedom fighters, including Gandhi, have been jailed here. But this prison also has a reputation for being one of the most dangerous prisons in India because of overcrowding and poor living conditions. There was a case not too long ago about a convict who attacked and killed another inmate because they got into a fight about water falling on them in the kitchen. There was another brutal incident where an inmate was murdered by 6 jail officials after they him. This triggered many violent protests by the jail inmates. So yeah, this is definitely not a prison that you should want to be sent to. And actually you shouldn't even do the crime, because at this place you don't want to do the time. Things get even more dangerous in at number 2 with Tihar Jail. This gruesome prison is located in New Delhi, India, and it is the largest complex of prisons in South Asia. This prison has an infamous reputation for having extremely corrupt guards, drug peddling, liquor smuggling, and they have brutalized living conditions. Life inside of the prison is compared to living in hell. The prison is falling apart. There is a dangerous ring of lethal weapons, violence, assault, drug addictions, and jail officials who abuse their power. The jail is currently housing double the amount of inmates it is supposed to be able to hold, so with the crowded jails and gross living accommodations, prisoners have turned extremely violent. Moving on to our number 1 spot on this dangerous list, we have Cellular Jail. Very creative name. Well, this is probably the most dreaded and horrifying colonial prisons located in India, and it was used by the British to exile Indian political prisoners. The prison was isolated from the mainland, and the prisoners had to endure some of the most violent and inhumane punishments. The prison was known as Cellular Jail because each inmate was housed in a separate cell, and each new inmate had to endure solitary confinement for the first 6 months. And then they were also expected to extract 2 pounds of coconut fiber each day, and if they failed to do it, they would be hit repeatedly with a cactus. If an inmate complained about the work, he would be handcuffed to a wall for 7 days and have to endure public. It was said that if you were sent to this jail, that it was equivalent to a death sentence.
Starting off with number 10 is the secret Ukrainian prison. So between 2014 and 2016, it's been confirmed that the Security Service of Ukraine, aka the SBU, operated a secret prison located in Kharkiv. Now the prison held inmates the SBU suspected of supporting Russia during its military intervention in Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea. Survivor Mykola Vakara came out after being held at the prison for 600 days. He shared that he was constantly, and the first thing he was told when he arrived was that he would get hit in the chest for every wrong answer he gave. Mykola was kept in a 2 square meter cell that was so cold that water inside it used to turn to ice, which actually caused him to lose his kidney. He was transported back to the prison after a surgery and forced to confess that he supported Russian-backed fighters even when he didn't. Mykola was finally released after Ukraine came under pressure from human rights groups fighting for the prisoner's release. To buy his silence and not say anything about the facility, he was paid a total of $3.80. You could have paid me $1 million and I still would have come clean about everything. Coming in at number 9 is Cat's Eye in Thailand. As a cat lover, the name is nice, I'm not gonna lie, but the place itself was far from it. Cat's Eye was a secret CIA prison set up in 2002 to hold a man suspected to be one of right-hand men. He was the only inmate of the prison for about 6 months, and his living arrangement consisted of him being inside a coffin-sized box and being constantly waterboarded nearly every day until he fainted. The second prisoner arrived in November 2002, and both men were used to test out enhanced interrogation techniques. Give me the strength! Give me the strength, it just gets worse. They were also both subjected to walling, which is basically a punish where they were repeatedly slammed against a wall. A month later, the prison was apparently shut down and moved to Poland, but no one can confirm this. Till this day, no one even knows the location of Cat's Eye or the fate of those prisoners. At number 8, we have Lexington HSU. Now this top secret high security unit was created in the 1980s and was a female-only prison. It housed any and all political prisoners that were accused of attempting to overthrow or disrupt the US government. Infamous inmates include Sylvia Baraldini, who fought for Puerto Rican independence, and Susan Rosenberg, who supported the Black Liberation Army. Now the prison itself was so secret it actually existed completely underground in total isolation from the world. External communication
information was radically restricted, as you can probably imagine. Prisoners were strip searched daily, subjected to constant fluorescent lighting and sensory deprivation, and all of that was done so they'd be worn down enough for an ideological transformation. It was closed down in 1988 after protests came in from Amnesty International. Filling at number 7 slot is the salt pit in Afghanistan, and surprisingly I'd heard of this one before despite it being secretly run by the CIA. The salt pit was meant to hold inmates suspected of having links with or involved in any activity. The prison itself used to be a brick factory, so as you can imagine, its cells are hella small and have no toilets or windows. Most inmates have one bucket in their room that they use for all their extratory needs, and for a bed they sleep on the cold floor naked. All of them are subjected to inhumane treatment and punishments like frequent mock executions. Can you even imagine the trauma of having to see them pretend to kill someone or them jokingly telling you that they're gonna kill you? Like, that is disgusting. The guards also play super loud music during the day as another form of psychological torture. Now, after all that, only one death has been confirmed by the prison, and the inmate was chained above his head. Then he died of hypothermia the next day. His family was never informed, and that is bloody sad. Now at number 6 is Penny Lane. Now this is one of the many secret prisons located at Guantanamo Bay. Opening its doors in 2003, Penny Lane is not your average prison. Just imagine the prison Pablo Escobar built for himself, and then you'll have more of an accurate idea of what it's like. The inmates live a life of luxury with access to comfy beds, a shower, a TV, and mind you, everyone there is a confirmed terrorist. It's unique because only terrorists undergoing double agent training are allowed to stay there. When their training is complete, they're sent back to their terrorist hub and have to send inside info back to the CIA. And in exchange, they get millions of dollars, which is a pretty good deal given you're a terrorist. Sometimes it works, sometimes the terrorists go back to their group and never contact the CIA again. It's really 50-50. Coming in at number 5 are Chinese black jails. These secret prisons are illegally run by individual Chinese provinces and local governments. Now if someone has a grievance, for example, they have to report it to their provincial or local government, and if they don't get the justice they wanted, then they're allowed to send that same report to the central government, which is like the daddy government. But it's sort of an inception situation since the governments are low-key competing with each other trying to be the best one. The number of reports coming in from each province decides how effective that government is, so to avoid being deemed ineffective, these local governments seek out the people who send in reports to the central government and do very, very bad things to them. The government's like, you ain't no damn snitch! Get in jail! We're in this together! Now they currently employ over 10,000 people to kidnap, torture, and detain their reporting citizens. The black prisons they're put in themselves are usually vacant homes, guest houses, or psychiatric wards. In 2009 it was confirmed that there are around 73 black jails inside Beijing alone, and the central government is very privy to that fact. They're just like, well, that's none of my business though. Carry on. At number 4 is the USP Marion. This secret prison was built back in 1963 as a high-tech replacement for Alcatraz. Like, how horrific of a prison do you have to be if you're the high-tech version of Alcatraz? Alcatraz was bad enough. Now 500 Alcatraz prisoners were transferred there and were forced into a behavior modification program. Prisoners shared that these sessions were more like psychological attack sessions. In 1973, the prisoners protested against the of a fellow inmate, which led to even stricter programs, one of which being the control unit. Now the control unit made the USP Marion famous, and it essentially involved you being in solitary confinement for 22 hours at a time. When you hear the phrase Marion model, that literally translates to psychological torture in every way, shape, and form. After 2 guards were killed in the early 80s, the entire prison was transformed into a giant control unit. And if I was in that place, I would go crazy. Can you imagine everyone in there is in just solitary confinement all the time? No! That's like my worst nightmare. Not being able to talk. Hell no. Filling at number 3 slot is a secret Iraqi government prison that is yet to be named. This prison is so horrific it's been dubbed worse than the Abu Ghraib prison. The prison is located in an airfield west of Baghdad, and prisoners are arrested and taken there if they've participated in an act that's deemed against the state. Freed captives have said they were while inside the prison. One man traveled to Iraq in search of his missing son, and after asking too many questions, they arrested him, beat him, sodomized him, attached electrical charges to his private parts, and then forced him to sign a confession which he didn't even get to read. Another inmate said he was on a daily basis and was beaten so badly he had serious leg injuries and even lost his front teeth. And that doesn't even scrape the tip of the iceberg of the things that I read about this prison. Like, I'm just not gonna go into it any further. You guys can get the gist of how bad it is. Now, at number 2 is Homan Square. Now this one sounds shady as hell. Homan Square is an interrogation compound located in Chicago, and it's highly dangerous since A, it's off the books, and B, the inmates inside aren't in any database, meaning family and friends can't find them. Prisoners have no access to any lawyer or attorney, and any that try to come to the facility are turned away immediately. Inmates can be interrogated for anywhere between 12 to 24 hours, and honestly, it's basically like a domestic black site. That's literally what it is. Angel Perez, a man released from the compound, said when he was taken in, he was the metal pipe by an officer that wanted him to cooperate in a drug sting. And finally, at number 1 are unnamed Yemeni prisons. Now this came from the Human Rights Watch, who were informed by various people that there is in fact a huge network of secret prisons in eastern Yemen. The anonymous people that came forward talked about what goes on in there and have said inmates suffer from and threats, electric shocks, sleep and sensory deprivation, beatings with metal tools, and they get every day. Yemeni family members of those who have just disappeared for months at a time never get a word about whether that person is alive, where they are, what they're doing, absolutely nothing.